Move, countermove, detect, prevent, and defense. Being a CISO is like waging a never-ending chess game against players you don't know, can't see, and attack without warning. On this podcast, cybersecurity experts from Zscaler's Office of the CISO have a pragmatic dialogue on cyber risks, current attacks, and security trends. Welcome to the CISOs Gambit. Hello, listener. Brad Moldenhauer here for another edition of the CISOs Gambit. In this episode, we will be focused exclusively on Trusted Internet Connection, or TIC 3.0. Our very own Danny Connelly engages in a discussion with Sean Connelly, no relation, on the subject. Sean is the TIC Program Manager and an accomplished senior security architect for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency under Homeland Security. Their dialogue will touch upon the beginnings of the TIC initiative right up to the present day, where we will attempt to understand how TIC 3.0 expands on the original initiative to drive security standards and leverage advances in technology to secure a wide spectrum of agency network architectures. This new version of the TIC is highly iterative, which means the guidance will better reflect modern processes and technological innovations compared to previous versions of the program. We'll also better understand how the TIC 3.0 recognizes modern shifts in cybersecurity and pushes agencies toward adoption while recognizing their challenges and constraints in modernizing IT infrastructure, and even review the recently finalized TIC 3.0 use cases for a conventional and branch office implementation. After listening to this conversation, I really do feel that the third version of the TIC policy brings government IT closer to the capabilities available to the private sector, and I think you will too. Enjoy.
Mr. Connelly, thank you for speaking with me this afternoon. I really appreciate your time. Understand that there are a lot of activities going on at CISA, especially with all the executive order fallout actions that are required, and I'm sure you're heavily involved with. So we really appreciate you being here and speaking to our listeners about this very important topic. To kick things off, Sean, can you give us a little bit of background on who Sean Connelly is and your role within CISA?
Yeah, sure. First, thank you, Danny, for the opportunity to talk here. This is going to be a fun conversation. Again, my name is Sean Connelly. I lead the TIC program, the TIC initiative at CISA. I'm the TIC Program Manager. My role, I kind of float around a little bit within CISA itself. You know, TIC is architecture, and TIC has many strategic interests across CISA and CSD. So I've supported both the Einstein program in the past. I've also supported the CDM, the Continuous Diagnostic and Mitigation Program, when it was first rolling out in 2013. But really, my home's always been with the Trusted Internet Connections Initiative, going all the way back to when I was at State Department in the mid-2000s, back through TIC 1, through TIC 2. Then I think about 2013, I moved over from state as a consultant and came to THS as a federal employee. And so I've been leading or supporting the TIC initiative, since the beginning, but really in the last few years with the momentum, if you will, even from the IT modernization report in 2017, where it essentially said we need to reset TIC. Been one of the primary players in that adoption of TIC 3, along, of course, with our partners at GSA, especially the enterprise infrastructure support team there with Jim Russo, and then at OMB and the team member over OMB that's leading TIC also.
That agency perspective is often missing in large projects, and I'm sure your experience from the State Department really helped morph the TIC program into what it is. So thanks for your dedicated service. Can you describe for our listeners what is TIC 3.0 and how did it come about?
Sure. So that's a great question. And as you said there, it's really changed in the last couple of years. So TIC in general, before we even get through the iterations, really, TIC is that driving security architectures, leveraging technology to secure a wide spectrum of aging network architectures. So at TIC 3, again, what we reset on about 2017, 2018, 2019, with Grant Schneider and the team over at the Federal CISO, is that shift in modern cybersecurity and pushing agencies toward adoption of more modern architectures. TIC 3 was developed to help accelerate agencies' cloud adoption and modernize their network security architectures. I think when you look, from the wide lens at TIC from where we were TIC 1, TIC 2. Really back then, it was about moving the data to where the security stack was, right? Where we had our firewalls, where we had our web proxies, all those different tools in those data centers there where the firewalls were. And that was really the focus of TIC 1, TIC 2 was to shift the data from a branch office or an embassy or even a remote user to channel it through those finite TIC access points. And really with TIC 3, with the advancement in security, the advancement in different visibility opportunities, and really this new modern architecture, we're able to then change this inside out, if you will, and now we can start pushing the security and that visibility where the resource is, whether the resource is a data point or identity or user or whatever, is now we can move the security closer to where it needs to be. It's no longer about simply channeling massive amounts of data through a couple finite access points across the agencies. So it's that shift from a single network boundary to align for a more distributed network architecture that really is the key to TIC 3.
I couldn't agree more. When we had one ingress egress point into an agency network and all of our data was contained within the data center, TIC 1, TIC 2 worked extremely well. It gave insight and visibility into traffic, but now all of our data is distributed. Our users are distributed. With the adoption of cloud services, the traditional TIC made it difficult to support the business and adopt those cloud services in a secure way.
And to your point there, agencies are really starting to move out to cloud. And they're still having the traditional requirements to channel all that traffic between their on-prem environments or their users through those TIC access points to get to the cloud. It really wasn't the most efficient or optimal or even secure way to do that. So through a lot of discussion with OMB and a number of agencies, we wanted to move out with TIC 3 to improve the flexibility, to improve the security, and improve the visibility from the previous iterations. What was forcing this, like we just talked about, it was cloud, there's mobility. Another larger one is just the amount of encryption, channeling all the traffic through those TIC access points. If they're rising, we all know how adoption of TLS 1.3 even really it's going to be a challenge for encrypting traffic. So we need to have new opportunities, new ways to be able to watch the traffic and understand what the traffic is about. And then I think another thing that was important with TIC 3, TIC 1, TIC 2, we had one essential reference architecture, and then we defended that reference architecture, for lack of a better term, for a number of years. But with TIC 3, it's much less about being prescriptive, saying here's the one way to do something. And it's more descriptive. So we explain the intent in TIC 3 and explain a primary or a couple different options to meet that intent. So, for example, blocking. Maybe a firewall can block the traffic. Certainly, it still can. And lean on that OSI model, right? But maybe there's something else in the stack that can also block. Maybe it's more on access management side and identity. Maybe it's some type of token or security group. So there's different ways to block. Firewall is just one way to do that. And then also, I think the other thing with TIC 2 or TIC 3, it's about the positioning of the security. Before it was always we had to send everything to that finite TIC access point. It's inflexible, just with all the different mechanisms in there, firewalls, IDS. I mean, how many times did you hear agencies say it's the firewalls, right? It's because there's such a complex environment in those racks. But now with TIC 3, agencies are now able to position that security closer to those resources, whether it's the user, the identity, or it's the device itself or a system, the service that we're trying to protect. So it's between that flexibility in security, flexibility in architectures, and then that visibility that really I think is the game changer for TIC 3.
The flexibility to have security closer to our users and focus on identity rather than backhauling traffic through an agency network is definitely a game changer, especially when COVID first hit and the remote users use case specifically allowing that flexibility for agencies to embrace and adopt new services. Can you speak a little bit more about that flexibility TIC brings and really it's up to the agency CIO to make sure security is in place, instead of making sure everything goes through one centralized point?
Sure. Yeah, that's a common question. So again, go back to OMB and the update the TIC initiative. Really, it's where OMB is coming out and saying the agencies had that flexibility, but to your point, agencies need to understand where the data is and where their security is. So it's again not that one prescriptive reference architecture. We give the intent. We define a couple different ways to be able to meet that intent. But it's up to agencies to have the understanding where to place that security. So there's a greater responsibility on the agencies, I think, when the TIC 1, TIC 2. But I think at the same point, like you're talking about, when the pandemic hit, and they're really just the resource loads that are going through those traditional TIC access points. Agencies are coming to OMB, agencies are coming to GSA, coming to us, and we need some relief now. That's why we released that interim telework in April of last year to say, okay, here's another way to do it. And, we specifically made the interim telework to deprecate at the end of last year. We said we'll have a remote user use case like you're talking about, release the draft of that in December of 2020. And the remote user use case builds on the interim telework guidance released in April. But it's really about giving agencies different options, different possibilities about how to secure their environment, also just to make it more efficient also, routing the traffic across CONUS just to send it out through a firewall stack may not be the most optimal solution for a number of reasons. And this gives those agencies choices to meet the intent.
Giving agencies the choices is certainly powerful. But yet, CISA needs to maintain visibility into that traffic to see kind of the threat landscape across the federal government. Can you talk a bit about how TIC 3.0 allows agencies to kind of have that flexibility, but yet maintain visibility by CISA? What is the Cloud Log Aggregation Warehouse, or CLAW?
Sure, yeah. So CLAW is an exciting program, part of the NCPS, you mentioned, the National Cybersecurity Protection Service program we have. So in traditional TIC 1, TIC 2 environments, where the agencies host those firewalls and their IDS sensors, DHS also had a number of sensors that we embedded at those same firewall stacks. And that was part of the requirement for agencies when they channeled that traffic through those firewall stacks, was to give us the visibility. So we moved toward TIC 3. And as that distributed architecture starts to really peel away some of the traffic that's going through those TIC access points, whether it's because it's encrypted or that's more maybe a remote user going directly to the cloud, that the old model certainly wasn't making sense. Not to be able to, even embed, if you will. There's discussions trying to figure out, could we embed sensors, CISA sensors at the cloud providers, but really that was never a consideration. It was more towards understanding how CISA could still maintain our mission to have that broad panoramic lens to monitor the USG, how we do in these new environments. And with hyperscalers, with different vendors themselves, they're often a wealth of different visibility and just be able to send telemetry. So we've built out the CLAW, the Cloud Log Aggregation Warehouse, does what it says, as a way to be able to ingest those logs that are coming from security vendors, whether it's a hyperscaler, whether maybe more in a SASE environment, ideally somewhere in the middle of the PAS, or just with a security vendor in general, whether it's a CASB or someone else, as just security solutions, to be able to send those logs to the CLAW. And then DHS still maintains that visibility requirements that are really embedded now in law. The Cybersecurity Act, I think, of 2015 was really where it embedded the NCPS requirements. And so with the CLAW itself, we now have the opportunity to be able to maintain that visibility. On our website, there's a section for NCPS on the CISA.gov website. There's a number of reference architecture volumes that are on the website for agencies to look at. Volume 1, it's called the NCPS Cloud Interface Reference Architecture, provides general guidance for agencies on participating in NCPS in the cloud. The information includes introduction to general reporting patterns for sending cloud telemetry to CLAW. Volume 2 has been released also. Contains a catalog of reporting patterns for how agencies can send telemetry to CLAW under those different cloud models. So I think between those 2 volumes that are out there, and again, we've worked with a number of agencies on pilots, so we have a handful. I don't like to talk about the specific number, but we are actively recruiting agencies to send traffic to the CLAW to help both our mission requirements and for the agencies themselves. They like to have the assurance that CISA is watching them and understanding what's going on in their environment. So I think this is a primary opportunity to take advantage of for agencies.
It's certainly a win-win from my perspective. Giving the agencies the flexibility to modernize their cybersecurity, and at the same time, knowing that CISA has visibility into that telemetry data is pretty powerful in my opinion. So shifting the conversation a bit, the TIC 3.0 reference architecture and the security capabilities catalog has a close tie to NIST 800-207, the zero trust architecture. Can you speak about your involvement with the development of those and how they came together?
Sure. So yeah, I want to just caution the audience. I always do this. So I'm one of the 4 co-authors on NIST 800-207, but I always position that I'm more the Ringo Starr of the authors. Scott, Oliver, and Stu, they're the rock stars of the group. I'm the drummer in the background there, keeping the beat. But there's an opportunity to align some of where we want to go with TIC and zero trust. I mean, a lot of the tenets that you see in special pub itself, like you said, are common to just general best practices for cyber hygiene, right? Data services or resources. All data needs to be secure, whether it's encrypted at rest, encrypted at motion, access by per session, or access is determined by policy. Of course, you want to measure the environments. I mean, those are common tenets across different programs. So I think a lot of symmetry already built in between where we want to go with TIC 3 and just the opportunity, if you will, with zero trust and this whole new way of looking at environments. And then also, we've worked with a number of agencies on pilots. And I think some of those pilots, some agencies are already very public about the pilots, like State Department under Jerry Karen when he was there. They're talking about their zero trust pilot and their TIC pilot. It was really the same pilot. A lot of the ways we were working together between the interest that State Department had towards zero trust and when we want to learn either for the the branch office or remote user. So there's a lot of interest between us and the outcomes that State Department produced. And then also, while TIC 3 certainly has a network security-based focus, we also recognize how the security started to position itself more toward identity, more toward data protections themselves. And TIC 3 is using the momentum from the interest of zero trust to be able to position TIC to also support those type of architectures.
Fascinating insight. The TIC 3.0 security reference architecture and NIST 800-207 really go hand in hand together, in my opinion. So too does the recently released presidential executive order. Can you describe for our listeners how TIC 3.0 enables or helps agencies meet the intent of the executive order?
Sure, yeah, there's a large hook or large interest in the EO towards zero trust. I mean, it's repeatedly mentioned in there. I think Section 3 is pretty much about moving agencies toward a zero trust architecture. And to your point, a lot of that, agencies come to us, okay, how can both CISA and TIC help agencies meet those implementation plans and these different milestones that are coming out? So we recognize with zero trust, right, the perimeter is this traditional perimeter security is no longer working. So that north, south, east, west that we worked at is just less relevant to today's architectures. So we need that new paradigm. So we were working with agencies and OMB to understand how to position these new capabilities, these new architectures in place. I think when you look at the benefits of zero trust, just some of the general benefits, zero trust, you need to have an accurate handle on the users, the devices, and data and applications. Some of that comes to CISA through CDM. Some of that comes through what we've been doing with CLAW and NCPS. And that's been coming through what we've done with TIC. So I think there's a number of ways that CISA's lined up to be able to help agencies with the accurate inventory. The ability to adapt to those flexible architectures. Again, that's what we're doing with TIC. I think what we're doing, you see toward CISA with the endpoint detection response, how they're now moving to have a more aggressive EDR solution available for the agencies. Also with CLAW itself, talking about the cloud log aggregation warehouse, how agencies can be able to send that data to us in these new ways. Then another one that's a key is the monitoring and alerting. The zero trust framework can be complex, and you still need to understand how you're going to aggregate all that data, analyze that data, react to that data, whether it's coming from some type of network to NDR, network detection response, or an EDR, the endpoint detection, or even going through threat intel. And the agencies still need to have the possibility or the way to react to all that. So I think there's a number of benefits that zero trust is pushing the agencies to adopt that, again, align closely with what we're trying to do with TIC and the greater CISA programs for a while now.
I certainly hope it helps drive agencies to adopt the TIC 3.0 framework. Can you share some observations or specific use cases agencies have piloted or implemented and proven to be successful? Basically, who would you say has done it well? And can you share any lessons learned that could potentially help other agencies?
Sure. Yeah, there's been a number of agencies that we've worked with. Mentioned I was at State Department for 8 years, very familiar with the State Department architecture and what they've done the last few years to be able to give relief, if you will, to the foreign service officers at the embassies and consulates. It's a paradigm shift for State Department, both from addressing the cloud concerns they've had and then also remote user challenges they've had for a long time. So State Department's always a primary one. I think another one that's been very interesting to watch is Small Business Administration. Of course, SBA, Maria wrote when she was there, and Guy Cavello and Bo Hauser, of course. We worked with SBA back in 2018, 2019, when Maria talks about this a lot, how they had a flood in one of their data centers. And that was the impetus to really shift and say we're getting out of being on-prem and move all these data, their resources to the cloud. And Maria and her team was very aggressive in shifting all that data to the cloud. At the same time, working with OMB and GSA to understand those security requirements, understand those visibility requirements coming back to CISA. And then when the pandemic hit, and of course, it's the CARES Act, where now SBA was responsible for, releasing all that money. I can't imagine where SBA would have been if it wasn't for that leak, if it wasn't for that water leak. They're still relying on their old traditional on-prem environment. So there's some real tangible examples like that. And there's also, again, what we're seeing in terms of the positive effects of State Department. What I think I can talk about is also we are using these pilots to inform those use cases we have coming out. I mentioned the ISAS PAS an email cloud pilot. Our use case, We're also looking at possibly having like a zero trust use case. I've just mentioned just around zero trust. There's some other ones we talk to agencies about, Internet of Things, having a use case for that. There's always been interest in some type of unified communications, those shared platforms, having some structure and rigor around how to secure those type of environments. I think they're all applicable. There's some other activities we're working with agencies towards IPv6. We haven't really talked about OMB's interest toward IPv6, and there's a large push from OMB to have agencies adopt IPv6 at greater rates. So we are working with agencies on some IPv6 operations they have. So there's a number of activities in the background. The only thing I would just want to position also is, aside from the pilots, which is a very structured process, and it goes through the Federal CISO Council, CIO Council, and there's approvals and all that. We also talk to agencies just more in an interview. We call it a TIC snapshot, where we really go in and understand just a very, very high level, how has the agency benefited from moving to these new architectures? And again, we take those lessons learned from those snapshots and then those pilots themselves to build out those use cases.
So really those pilots are helping CISA make better informed decisions with actual data and give you the ability to help evolve the program, as well as giving agencies additional flexibility. So that's really insightful. I appreciate you going into that. Many agencies I talk to, they really understand the benefits of TIC 3.0 and the flexibilities that brings to their agency and the overall value it brings to CISA, but they don't necessarily know where to get started or how to get started. What are the best ways an agency could get up to speed on TIC 3.0, the security capabilities, and just get help with where to start?
Yeah. To your point, Danny, not every agency is a very mature, SOC or CISO or CIO office in terms of a lot of them are stressed and organized in a lot of different ways. And so we need to have different ways to be able to help agencies depending on where they are in their sophistication, maturity of how they can support it. This may not be a primary interest to them, but some larger organizations, they have a much more developed TIC program. So I think there's two different ways we'll talk about here. The first one is the documentation that we have available itself. If you go to CISA's webpage or if you go to a common search engine, just type in CISA space TIC TIC. That usually comes up with us being the first hit. There's a Trusted Internet Connections page on CISA.gov. On there's a number of documents. We call them the core guidance. We suggest agencies review those, it has different chapters, as Steve Kovacs talks about from Zscaler. Start with the guidebook itself. Really, the guidebook helps a lot of the agencies that have familiarity with TIC 1 and TIC 2. These explain the differences from the old TIC initiative and where we are in TIC 3. So I think guidebook starts first, gives the high-level goals of the program. The next one's a reference architecture, provides those concepts that we just talked about, like trust zones and PEPs, and understands how they work together. And then we have the security capabilities, the use cases, and the overlays. And we consider these more to be the tactical, the day-to-day, where the agencies will look between the capabilities catalog and those use cases. The use cases provide agencies with a network security patterns and capabilities for specific computing resources in terms of it could be, a use case for a branch office, a use case for a remote user. We're going to have ones coming out soon. These are outlined. They'll be memo, but there's use cases for cloud in terms of IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS. The overlays are vendor supplied, and this is a mapping of the vendor services to the TIC 3 capabilities. And between these, using these overlays that the vendors produce and the use cases that we're working to produce along with OMB and GSA, agencies can employ those to be able to secure their environment. So the first place we always start is a CISA webpage, and there's a frequently asked questions on the website also to, maybe some stuff we didn't hit in the guidebook, or it's much easier to just find the FAQ. So that's always the primary way. One thing I want to promote though also is we recently worked with the Fed VTE, the Federal Virtual Training Environment. They have a number of modules that are TIC focused, and we're just working to release those, I think this month, in fact. So it provides an overview of the TIC modernization efforts. We go through, just I think 5 to 10 minute little modules explaining the different aspects of the program to help everyone understand what the difference is with TIC 3.
Thank you, Sean. And as we wrap up this episode of the CISOs Gambit, I wanted to leave our listeners with some final thoughts. TIC 3.0 is a game changer for the federal government because it gives them the flexibility to embrace modern cybersecurity solutions such as Zscaler. It is no longer efficient or effective to force all agency traffic through a centralized monitoring point. TIC 3.0 gives you that flexibility while ensuring CISA still has visibility into the threats targeting your agency. TIC 3.0 truly is a game changer.
Thanks for listening to the CISOs Gambit with Zscaler's Office of the CISO. Check back with your podcast provider regularly for more episodes. Brad, Nicola, Mark, and Danny are CISOs for the Americas and European regions at Zscaler. You can find their profiles on LinkedIn or reach out to them and other CXO transformation leaders in the Zscaler CXO Community LinkedIn group. Zscaler is a zero trust exchange inline cloud security provider for some of the largest companies on the Forbes Global 2000. Find out more about Zscaler at zscaler.com. Copyright 2021.